Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models. My name is Bill Boudreau, and we're going to be kicking off a new step-by-step video build of AMK's F-14D Super Tomcat. Hopefully you had a chance to check out our recent inbox review where we went through every detail of this kit's contents. This video build is going to be basic in nature, where we're going to cover construction, tips, techniques on how to deal with issues that we may encounter, and we'll also get into some more intermediate techniques, especially as we get into the painting and weathering phase of this build. Now, almost all of the products that we use in this series are available at our US store, BJ Hobby Supply. So we'll bring you an episode every other week, at least, and so hopefully you'll join us, and let's get building. We'll start here with the ejection seats. I'll get a cocktail stick in there. All right, we got two halves coming together. Let me get some focus. Two halves coming together, covered by the seat's backrest and cushion. Disappointed that there's not any cloth texture, so we'll fix that up a little bit. The top of the seats reveal gaps here, so let's get the Vallejo plastic putty out. Real simple technique. You've seen it 1,000 times from Bobby. Make sure we'll get an adequate amount in here. So using a Q-tip, we'll moisten it up and just wipe away the excess. Trying to make sure that we don't remove too much. Obviously we need the putty in there. We'll get it done on both seats. I'm thinking I only need one application here, but if painting still reveals gaps, we can repeat this process and paint again. Coming over to our cockpit tub, we'll glue in our side horizontal console panels using Mr. Cement S here. Certainly making sure I install the panels in the correct spots on the tub. Each panel, as you can see here, they have their locating pins, so to speak. So alignment is not too much of an issue, although there can be a tight fit a little bit here. But ultimately we get it in place. So we'll get our aft circuit breaker panels installed here in the aft reel section. Now we have 4 knee consoles that go on our tub here. You can see the locating and alignment recesses on all 4 areas. So we will get all 4 of them in place here. Be sure to install them after your horizontal side consoles are in place. Here's a view of how the side panels are installed on the tub. Not going to glue them in now. I want to paint them as separate pieces, all 4 of them here. So, all right, using our snips, we'll get this structure out for the refueling probe bay. Using a nice medium sanding stick, we'll get that big burr off here. I'm actually thinking, I think a scraper tool in many cases can be just as effective yet more efficient than a sanding stick perhaps. This is Trumpeter's Master Tools high quality scraper, so we'll gently scrape away high spots. Then we'll come back and smooth things out with some sanding here. Feel free to use one technique over another. Similar results from both in this case. All right, let's get this bay installed. We do have an alignment notch here that goes on the surface of the tub. We'll dry fit this all in place, making sure we have good contact points all the way around here. And we'll go ahead and glue here. A little bit of glue on the back, and we should be all set. A little more glue back here. Perfect. And that takes care of our tub here. All right, with all these nose landing gear bay pieces laid out and being just a bit careless at cutting these pieces off the runner, and I think you can see here I've got some pretty pronounced burrs all over the place here. Yeah, I was just kind of in a hurry, I guess, but we'll take the time to sand them all away. Let's get a nice medium stick here. I'm not so concerned of the surface finish of these edges, but bear in mind that some areas where you cut off the runner, you'll need to be cognizant of that surface finish where you're sanding. Especially in prominent spots where, you know, that'll show in your paintwork. So go back over those spots with a finer grit. And really, exercise some patience in this process. Taking care of these areas can make the difference between having a poor fit or a good fit. I'll get the rest of this sanded up off camera. Okay, let's get our nose landing gear bay together. We'll get all 4 of our sidewalls installed to kind of dry fit everything. Each piece has their own locating notches. So far, everything going together is a breeze so far. I could have maybe painted each wall and the ceiling as separate pieces. Certainly feel free to do that. As I think gluing the edges, you know, we're going to glue the edges around here. Not going to have any impact on your paintwork. Take a look at this detail though with it all together. I mean, that looks really nice. Glue application here. Let's put it on the outside of the surfaces. That's where you can see most of the seam lines. Want to make sure that these surfaces are square and vertical. Looking good. So you can see here, you can see all of the edges. Get a little bit of glue down in here. And there we go. Oh. Excuse my clumsiness. Inside here we got a little seam line. So we're going to put a little bit of glue here. And we're all done. I think what I want to do now is I think I want to shift back over to the ejection seats and show you a technique I like to employ. All right, we're here in my paint booth because we're going to get ready for some paint application. What I'd like to do is add some cloth texture to the seat back and cushions, just to kind of add a little flavor here since I'm going to have the canopy wide open. I have some microcrystal clear here that we're going to use to glue on some tissue. We'll get a good amount of it onto our palette here. Then we'll come back with some water. Come back some water here to dilute it. Just a few drops, roughly a 2/3 glue, 1/3 water mixture, then give it a good stir. I mean, the more water you use, the more it's going to take to dry, so you don't have to go hog crazy with water. I've got a piece of tissue here cut out for the top of the ejection seat. We'll get and put in place, tacked into place, I think. Be the better option here. Nothing pretty right now, just get it in place again and secure to the seat. And we're going to start wetting it down. This technique is common for armament modelers who like to put tarps on stowage. So I always have, I'm going to grab my pin vise here nearby. Employing this technique, this pin really gives me more control to maneuver a wet, gluey, ooey piece of tissue around. And I start tucking things in here into place. Eventually, as you wet the tissue, you'll start to see some of the wrinkles come in. And you just start working around the areas. Just kind of tap things down a little bit. Start to saturate that tissue. Let's zoom in here. Let's zoom this camera in a little bit. This is where you can really start to see some cloth texture coming into play. I do pay attention to the edges on an injection seat, of course. If they're tucked in appropriately, I won't have to do so much trim work after everything is dry to cut some of the edges. Textures are starting to get close to what I want, but I'm not really striving for perfection here. As long as you have your wrinkles where you want them at this point, you can use your brush or pin vise to fine-tune the texture you would like to see. When satisfied, we'll let it sit and dry thoroughly and trim where needed, and then we'll be ready to paint it up. All right, let's get our cockpit pieces primed up here with a bunch of associated bits as well. We're going to be using Mr. Surfacer 1500 gray for this, so let's give it a good shake. The 1500 is fairly thin stuff already, perfect for priming. We're going to give it a good stir. But I always like to thin it a bit more outside of my airbrush. Get it into my little cup here. Alright. So Mr. Color Leveling Thinners is the perfect thinning agent for Mr. Surfacer, and I like to dilute this about 50 to 75% thinners to 25% Mr. Surfacer. And we'll mix that up. And we'll get it into our airbrush here. It's just the perfect primer for anything, really. So I always test spray out of my airbrush, kind of clean out contaminants, gets the paint flowing. I also do it to make a quick practice run of spray patterns as well. Alright, a light misty coat on these types of bays is always needed. Concentrate on the very corners and edges before the main surfaces that accumulate most of the paint. And again, a light misty coat. Not applying too much at this point. Again, we really want to avoid accumulation. Same deal with our cockpit tub here. Bobby talks about that biting point. Mastering that for the purpose of very thin misty coats goes a real long way at preventing excessive buildup of paint. I'm not applying it too wet here either. Again, focusing on edges, avoiding buildup. Or excessive buildup, rather. Alright, here's one of our seats, dried with the cloth texture. Let's get a toothpick here so we can go hands-free. Always try to go hands-free when you can. We may apply a bit of extra in these areas where we did the filler. We'll be able to see if more filler is needed. And light misty coats. It's okay to prime and then find out that we need a little more filler and then You know, we add that filler, smooth it out again, and then come back with some more primer. So. All looks good over on the backside details here. We have our cockpit pieces all right here for the top coat. Going to go with Model Air 71046 pale blue gray. The instructions, they call out for a darker FS number, but I think looking at reference photos have shown under sunlight a little brighter shade there. So I'm going roughly with a 50-50 or maybe a 60% paint to 40% thinner ratio here. Nice test spray here. Lines of varying widths. I really like to make sure very fine lines can be sprayed. Yeah, real thick, nice thin. Just make sure the paint flows nicely here. So I'm using a Harder and Steenbeck Evolution with a 40,000th inch nozzle. Personal spraying style is multiple very light coats to achieve coverage. I like to avoid excessive spray buildup and conserve minor details. I think this comes from primarily being a 72nd scale builder. So using light reflection, we go with a nice misty coat, really thin coats. Just need to get bare minimum coverage. Not going hog wild here with paint thickness. For this more complex shaped instrument panel for the reel, still try to get the edges as well. For the tub, similar to the primer coat, just get the edges here. Again, I'm not too focused on the main surfaces because that'll build up in the final coat. So let's go with our final coat here. Which, hoping you can tell on camera that this is more of a wet coat. Again, primarily focused on more the main surfaces now of the cockpit tub because I did get the corners and the edges with my initial misty spray there. Do this on all the pieces. Sounding like a broken record here, getting the corners again. Staying away from the main surfaces. That's what I really want to do here. The main surfaces that I'll otherwise see the most paint buildup. I'm using Model Air's 71001 white in this nose wheel landing gear bay. Also going to apply that to the accumulator as well. The final top coat application, a bit more wet, of course, and a bit more focused on the main surfaces. Rotating the piece around to ensure we get around all the details that really litter this assembly. Coming in with some 71057 Model Air black test spray pattern. Nice flow. This is the actuator support structure. That's behind the Rio seat. And misty spray. Same type of paint application there. Of course, let's get the seats as well. Both ejection seats. Even the texture that's on the front side. So this is going to conclude episode 1 here. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for episode 2 as we complete the cockpit build.